Newsflash, there is infighting in the Lamborghini world. Apparently, a huge misunderstanding. Those that are uninitiated feel this is a direct replacement of a long line of 10-cylinder coupes. It isn't, but not for the reasons that you would think. Before you and I debate this whole misunderstanding, first, the elephant in the room. Now, if you have been living under a rock, I am here to tell you, back there, no longer a 10-cylinder. You kind of know what's coming here, hybrid, which means only one thing, a lot more weight. Depending on the flavor of Huracán you want to compare this to, it's anywhere between 500 and 700 pounds more. Lamborghini will tell you this is around 3,700 pounds. That's a bold-faced lie because they don't like quoting the mass with fluids. Now, how are you going to move a car without fluids? So in reality, this is 4,100 pounds, 1,860 kilograms. With that, let's go into that Strada. Oh yeah. We're going to talk about that. And now we're in sport. Mr. Frantic? You go. Oh my God! Yes, it is a hybrid, but this one of the most lively hybrid systems that I've experienced. I have to say, the same architecture isn't that of a Welto. It just seems significantly more lively here because of the size car. Now, that being the case, the bad news. And to get to this, I'm going to shut up and let you hear the bad news. That's second gear. Oh, can you hear that? Yes, that is indeed a flat, plain crank back there, but it doesn't sound it. I mean, it feels it, but I'm shocked the engineers in Untitled Chapter released that sound. Now, I'm certain it's going to change over the years as we get the ultimate performante and different flavors of it. But this ain't a cheap car. We'll get to that later, but it should sound significantly better than that. Granted, it doesn't sound like the lawnmower that was than Boxster, but it's that big of a step backwards in the oral sensation. Now, what's fascinating about those electric motors is they're not made by Lamborghini. They're not made in Italy. They're made in England by a company owned by AMG. I did an interview with the chief executive officer of that company. You can see that here. Basically, what they've created they have a fancy name for them, but I call them pancake motors. They're about this wide. They weigh something like 30 kilos. You can put them in the overhead in an airplane, like carry-on baggage. They're that light, and they effectively provide a crazy amount of power in addition to the 4-liter twin turbocharged V8. Yes, I said 4-liter twin turbocharged V8, not V10. Now, Lamborghini aficionado, actually Volkswagen Group aficionado, would say that's got to be the same engine from the Urus, which in turn was pilfered from the Cayenne. That's not the case. You see, this is bespoke built by Untitled Chapter, so much so it has its own code. It's the L-411 as opposed to the EA839, like in Cayennes and Audis and all that stuff. Then we get into the real differences of this. And that is, let's start with the construction of the vehicle. Like the Revuelto, it's a tub, but you can't say it's the same platform and call it a day. The construction materials are different. So instead of this being like made of frankincense and myrrh, basically a carbon tub, it's a special kind of aluminum. Then, if I'm honest with you, this is not attractive to me. It's too techno because it's techno. Like, for example, it's not just this air channel here, it's also the daytime running light, which is not just a daytime running light. Yes, it's very interesting, very Lamborghini interpretation. However, this is hollow. This channels air to the radiator here, as well as to the front brakes. Now that we've sorted out the front, it's time to focus on the business end, which would be the engine and the brakes. How do we do this? 1, 2, 3 vents to channel the air to the radiators or to cool the brakes. And here's where we take another fascinating turn, and that is getting air around the wheels, which is usually the most inefficient part, at least aerodynamically, of the car. And here is a couple of unique tweaks going on here that we're seeing from other cars from, say, France. Remember the Bugatti Tourbillon? There wasn't a huge amount of bodywork behind the rear tire. Same kind of deal here. Now that we have that out of the way, it's not just about pilfering design inspiration from 60s era race cars. Rather, it's getting back to the basics of aerodynamics, and that is getting air over the car. Yes, the car is low, you got this channel in the roof, but really it's about this. This works in conjunction with this to avoid the pitfalls of this canyon. Granted, not as pretty as in the Revuelto, which is totally open. This is kind of stacked in order to shoot the air to hit the spoiler at precisely the right point to balance efficiency of the air leaving the car, stability, and downforce. Which brings us back to that misunderstanding. You see, it's not about the hybrid system. It's about all of the bits, the science around it, that make the hybrid system and the output work. Now that we have the nerdy bits out of the way, it's time to make some changes, and to do that, we have to go through the labyrinth of knobs and buttons that have been pilfered from the Revuelto. So here we are going to go to that Strada. Oh yeah, and then that goes into, okay, Corsa. With that, wish me luck. Oh my god. Oh my god. This thing breaks traction very easy. This, I hadn't said it before, this is a crazy fast car. But that's not the point of this aspect of our discussion. This is how does it feel? Now, granted, all the math is kind of the same. Wishbones, adjustable dampers, they have all this telemetry stuff, and it added more computers to control everything, which they need to because it's heavy. But you put all of that aside because this is now a completely different way in which to build the cheap seats of the Lamborghini sports car world, and it kind of works. It feels different than any other Huracán that came before it. It's, I guess techno is the best way to describe it. I don't feel like I'm driving around with my hair on fire. I don't feel like I'm getting out over my skis. That's the huge point here. If we get into a little bit of history, it was really the Acura NSX. Great car that brought a supercar type performance down to a daily type experience where you get into an Acura and it felt like any other Honda, even though it was the NSX. And that kind of cascaded its way from the Germans first, then the Italians, where even that Revuelto, I drove it every day in EV mode and it was very livable. That's kind of what's going on here, but the smaller size and some of the work they've done in tuning this more so than the Revuelto, they've engineered that bite back into it. Something that's been missing in all supercars, if I'm honest. And it's basically, it's that respect, kind of like with a hot girl. If you do something wrong, it's gonna be a bad day for you. We now arrive at the biggest delta between this and the car it is supposed to replace, and that would fall under the heading of technology, specifically new or bleeding edge technology is very painfully expensive. You see, an Huracán, for the better part of its life, base prices were like mid-twos. That is no longer the case. You see, the base price for this, $357,621. Now, as much as I would love to go through all 33 options that are fitted to this specific car, we don't have the time for that, so we're gonna go through different tranches of options. They start with the serial production options. Options you would find on Buicks. Those total, I think about 10 options, $86,600. Then there's the ad personam options. Those are like the Porsche exclusive manufacture, $42,500. Then there's something that I call exploring the boundaries of maturity and owning a Lamborghini. You see this? It's not one of those colors where it looks like you're driving around with your hair on fire. This is like a blue matte. It is stunning. I love Lamborghinis in mature colors because they speak to me, even though I'm not a Lamborghini guy. They better speak to you because that paint, $26,800. That kind of works in conjunction with the interior. Granted, it's about almost $5,000 in this like comfort seat, which best Lamborghini seat I have ever experienced, bar none, including an Urus. But that leather, to make it look pretty. Now, my cameraman and I were having a debate. You see, he says it's orange on the inside. I say it's more of like a saddle with an Italian hue. All of that is like $10,000. Then we get into the very popular Lamborghini options of carbon fiber. Me, I'm not a carbon fiber guy, but if you like carbon fiber, have I got a deal for you? Because this is about $30,000 just in carbon fiber. Then, very good news, you don't have to pay extra for carbon ceramic rotors. That's huge. How much does this all cost? Well, that's where we arrive at $486,721. Put another way, not quite the Revuelto, which is the equivalent of a nice house. In California, this is the equivalent of a nice condo in California. Then we get to the very, I don't want to say painful, but prudent discussion of resale. And here we have to talk about the tale of the 296 and the Revuelto, both cars that share the same electric motors that this car has. The 296, when it comes to resale, not going very well. That was like a $400,000 car and up, depending on how you spec'd it. Previously in the Ferrari world, you bought a Ferrari, it was kind of money in the bank. 296s are kind of going that way. The Revuelto, that is a different story. Granted, it's only been out a year. There aren't a lot of transactions because they didn't make many of them. So you look on Bring a Trailer, there's only a handful of them. And they go one of two ways. They go basically what you paid for it, maybe a little bit less, or if you picked an amazing color, like a deep forest green. Again, a mature color, they go for at least resale for well over the MSRP. That brings us back to this. Can I tell you what the future of this one is going to be? I don't know. If I were reading the tea leaves, I would say Ferrari, I think they got over their skis on the cost, the base price of those 296s. I don't know where we are here. I'd say we put a pin in this discussion, check back in about a year. Let's step back to city and go into EV mode. Yeah, we're in EV mode. Now we are floating on electrons here. And let's have a discussion about this as a car, something you live with, something you use. And the first thing you notice, wow, it's very different than other entry-level Lamborghini sports cars in that, look at this, I've got all this room. It's almost like a Cadillac in here. You feel as if this revised dashboard, which basically lifted from the Revuelto, is farther out. You feel more like shoulder room. Now granted, this is by design. This whole tub, which is made of aluminum, has been designed to allow for more space to make this feel not like a prison camp. And I'd say job done, definitely. I would also love to see a little bit more differentiation between this and the Revuelto. Maybe the screen is not quite exactly the same. It's literally lifted, and the UX kind of goofy. I shared that with you in the Revuelto episode. And then there's what you don't notice, where you drive it around and it sounds like a kit car, if I'm honest. It sounds like it's made in the shed in the southeast of England, like my Lotus back in my London days. But the reality is that's all very high quality materials that you're hearing like creak, not rattle, creak as you drive the car aggressively in this mode. And with that, have you ever had that inner voice inside of you just scream at you to shut the F up. That's kind of what's going on for me right now. This is another misunderstanding, but just for me. I did not expect it to be this lovely to live with on the inside. That is not something that goes hand in hand with Lamborghinis. It's not any one thing. It's not just the seats, it's not just the materials, and it's not just the size. All the pieces come together. Yeah, that's a surprise. And shocker of shockers, yet another misunderstanding. This about today's experience. We really needed a track to explore the boundaries of what this thing can do, which brings us to resolving the entire misunderstanding. The big deal here is, yeah, you're losing a 10-cylinder personality, which has been the hallmark since this thing came out. But you're trading it for capability, because if we're honest, you go back to when this thing was new, it was lovely, but you bought it because it was a Lamborghini and sounded different. The Ferrari, the Porsche of its day was significantly more capable. That's not the case anymore. These things are now like direct competitors in terms of dynamics and how it makes you feel. Anyway, that brings us to the wish list here. And number one, you know what I'm going to say here. That exhaust, wow, is it terrible. But you know they're going to fix it in coming different flavors of the car. A flat pane crank, that should make me see Jesus when it opens up, and I don't get that here, which brings us to really the solution. And let's forget about coming updates of Performantes and STOs and Technicas, and let's make a real competitor to a GT3. Now, before you banish me as a Porsche nerd, hear me out. What I'm asking for is this: lightweight. Let's take 500-600 pounds out of it. And of course, manual transmission. Now, I'm not just saying this because I want a manual transmission. I'm saying this because GT3s, as much as you want to beat on GT3s, there is still a resale market for them that goes this way. And no one is competing with that. So here, you got a different interpretation of what this used to be. How about we give the people what they want? But I am just one man. At this point of the episode, I turn around to you guys to opine in the comments below, or if you're on social media, MotoManTV, all one word, MotoManTV, all one, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. And with that, until we see you in the next episode, bis später. So you may be asking yourself, why do we have a Gallardo as the car that came before, what is that, the Temerario?
The Temerario.
Why not an Huracán? Well, here's the reason why. Cody. You see, this car, it's actually family, because Cody was an intern of mine how long ago?
16 years?
Wow, that makes me really old. And apparently, I didn't know this, but I was a drug dealer back then, because what did I let you do?
Well, there might have been a shot or two where I needed to help you out by moving that Gallardo back in the day.
And what color was that Gallardo?
It was black with black wheels.
Uh-huh. So apparently, the MotoManTV intern program, you graduate and 16 years later, you get your own Lamborghini.